Honestly, it was, my parents are immigrants. And so it was the like coming from nothing to become something great. So it was always about this like greatness, even though those words weren't used, but it was who I think my parents idolized. And so that was like the unspoken value system that was passed down to us. I remember my parents were like terrified when I said that when I dropped out of Stanford grad school for, and started at that point, I was like, I just need to do something different. Started a chocolate company. My parents basically decided that they didn't want to be beholden to anybody for their survival. And so they said, we're going to start a company. I don't know what we're going to do, but it was like pure desperation. Hi.
How you doing?
Oh my God. Finally here after a year of rescheduling.
It's so funny. Universe synchronicity kind of way. So I'm in Hawaii right now at a accelerator cohort. I was prepping for our talk today last night, and we have this WhatsApp thread with all of our cohort members. And for whatever reason, somebody bubbled up the tweet that I did October 7th with you sitting on stage, where I was like, oh my gosh, this is the best talk. And I was like, oh, I'm talking to her tomorrow.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Someone bubbled up your tweet.
Yeah, totally.
That's so funny. In what context?
We're all headed to SF to kind of do a bit of a roadshow, and then we do SF Tech Week and then LA Tech Week. So
amazing.
I think everybody's got SF Tech Week on the brain, I think.
Nice. Where in Hawaii are you? You said Kauai?
In Hawaii, yeah, in Honolulu.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, amazing. That's where the accelerator is?
Yeah.
Just have definitely upgraded.
It's definitely, yeah. It was one of those that when I first applied and then they were like, all right, we're really interested to talk to you. I was like, where is it? And so spending 8 weeks here was not a bad thing.
Definitely not a bad thing. Oh my gosh. So do they pay for your housing and stuff?
How's Meatloaf?
He's doing great. He is, I'll show you a photo. He's thriving. He's getting into stranger danger. And so, which means like, I need to be around him a lot more. This is all, but this is this morning.
Oh my gosh. That's so good. And was it 500 days before landing on August?
It was like a bajillion. Like it was insane. It was the very last day until we would have to go into court and like officially go in person. And that was we're like, nope, we're going to get it done this way. Like, and it wasn't because we just like couldn't decide. It's just because we had allocated zero time to it.
Yeah, right.
It was not the top priority.
Meatloaf was solid too, I think.
I know. Meatloaf almost became his real middle name.
I love it. Amazing. Well, so just for context, it's interesting. I had started Zero to right after I had started my company. And this idea that like, I love Peter Thiel's book and the idea of starting something from nothing. Coming out of school, you went to work for a company before you started your first company, right? How long were you at the first company right out of school?
6 months, less than. Okay. It's my only real job ever.
Nice. Okay. So was that, what was it about that? Like, did you get some knowledge and experience and then be like, okay, I can do this myself?
Yeah. So much of this stuff is the whole, I'm analyzing it in retrospect and maybe cherry picking certain things. It's hard to say, right? But I think that so much of this was an inevitability. First off, I think that the people who my parents admired and talked about were business people. It was the Bill Gates of the world. It's like those types of the Larry Ellisons, like those are the people who they admired and they always talked about with us. And so even though we were growing up in this small town in Texas, the ideas that we talked about as a family were about these, like, it wasn't necessarily tech. It was, also Warren Buffett and investing and even Arnold and working out and just these
people who saw the world differently and were like, I'm going to go make it different.
Honestly, it was, my parents are immigrants. And so it was the like coming from nothing to become something great, or, in Bill Gates' case, like just growing up in a great family and becoming something great. So it was always about this like greatness, even though those words weren't used, but it was who I think my parents idolized. And so that was like the unspoken value system that was passed down to us. And at that point, neither of my parents were entrepreneurs. Like they weren't doing that. They just admired that. And my dad was a doctor, so he ran the pediatric ICU in not only our hometown, but also like we're in the panhandle of Texas, which is now getting very famous for all of the data center investment, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
But again, it was just like a dirt road town. And we ended up there. My parents grew up in India, but we ended up there because my dad was a doctor and they desperately needed doctors. And so, we were immigrants. And so it was whoever pays us the most, we'll go there. Doesn't matter. We're not trying to, we're just trying to be wherever we can survive. And so that ended up being Texas. And so, even though we were in this small town, we had these ideas. And so my dad was a doctor, my mom was a stay at home mom. And then when I was in third grade, my parents basically decided that they didn't want to be beholden to anybody for their survival. And so they said, we're going to start a company. I don't know what we're going to do, but it was like pure desperation because they didn't love the way the hospital was run. It felt like, the administration was kind of messing things up.
Oh my
You know,
gosh. My
as
dad
a
had the same thing. He actually
really
he was a doctor, and at his hospital, very specifically, he remembers the head, the chief medical officer, chief surgeon coming in one day and saying, "All right, everyone, there's this great new drug that's out, and we think it's exciting, so we should really start getting this thing like out there." And it felt one of these sort of like, let's push this thing. And he was like, nope, that's it. I'm out. So he left and bought a building and started his own practice. He was like, I'm doing my own thing.
doing something. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. It's like a lot of people get into, building companies in different ways. And I sometimes think this like act of desperation or wanting to be in control of your own destiny is probably one of the most powerful forces for that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, my dad was the one who was making the money, but then his income powered my mom to go back to school, got another degree in our, hometown Texas Tech University college, in what was called management information systems, but it was kind of related to computers, and she got really interested in computers. And I remember one of her class projects was networking our house. So the master students from the school like came over and drilled holes in our attic and were like running cables through, and that's how we got internet.
Nice.
So funny. This was like probably in the 90s, essentially late 90s. And from there, she would do anything. She's like, I want to figure out how to build a business. And it was purely just who will pay me for stuff. And so she rented a spot at the mall, and taught PowerPoint classes and Microsoft Word
That's
classes.
great.
That's how she started. And now, fast forward 20 years, I think it's 25 years a month ago is the anniversary of them starting this company. And now it's a, software company that builds utility billing software and supports our entire family. And my dad's quit his medical practice and now runs a company with my mom. And it's a whole thing. But, what's interesting is that that business took off when I was in grad school. So growing up, I didn't see any of that. And so it's funny because I think now if you look at it, a lot of people are like, oh, your parents are entrepreneurs. Like that's how you guys got into this. And because my brother also has a startup, but that's not how we got into it. Because if anything, my parents were like very risk averse. They didn't want us to get risky.
Right.
And so I think it was just the fact that they admired that and that value system traveled down to me. Like when I was in seventh grade, I was making duct tape purses and selling them at the mall. Like I just
I love it.
love making things.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, wow, if I can make things and people pay me for that and that could be my job, that was the coolest thing in the world for me. If I could actually build something that people would pay for.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, and even though you were saying that it was in grad school that it really sort of took off, and there was, to your point about like the principles, the values, and what they admired, there was still that sort of looking and listening around the hustle of breaking free and making your own way.
It's so real that and sorry to interrupt you, but it's
No.
so real that kids don't listen. People don't listen to what you say. They watch what you do. Like that is such a fundamental principle of life and human behavior. And even though my parents were telling me to be a doctor, be a lawyer, be something stable, and what I saw was them admiring these,
Right.
titans of industry. And I think my brother and I implicitly, for better or worse, were like, oh, if we want mom and dad to be proud of us, like maybe we need to do that too.
Yeah.
a
No,
kid's
totally.
survival mechanism. So that's what we did. And I think I remember my parents were like terrified when I said that I wanted to when I dropped out of Stanford grad school for and started at that point I was like, I just need to do something different. Started a chocolate company. They were embarrassed and didn't want to tell any of their friends what I was doing. Didn't know how to explain what I was doing. My
Totally.
brother turned down a job at Facebook, and my mom for many years was like, "Oh my god, I regret not pushing him and forcing him to do that." It all worked out. They couldn't really
Yeah,
stop us.
totally. And it's funny you were talking about how kids, especially look at what you do versus what you say. So I have two boys, 8 and 5, and my oldest William has been watching the evolution of Stack List as we've been building it. And now we were at the pool right before I went to Hawaii, and a little girl came up and said, "Hi, my name's Megan." My oldest goes, "Hi, my name's William, and this is Kyle. He's the CEO of Stack List." And and the little girl was like, but like, just watching this, like, and I've seen his evolution even sitting in his car seat. We're driving down the street, and his little mind is like spinning as he's watching out the window, and he turns and he's like, what if I took Legos that I don't like and I put them all in a bag, and then I put like a number on it, and I was like $5, and I could like sell individual bags of like Legos, and like he just went on this whole thing about this, like, and you're like, okay, even if I'm not around tomorrow, like we've got this like
Yeah,
path
we've
going.
got this
So
programming, and
yeah,
yeah,
which is so.
it's
What was
amazing.
like? So you came out of school and you went to work for somebody else, but that didn't last long. Was that one of those? And I know I've seen your reliance on gut and instinct and things like that. Was there a moment when you were working for someone else that you were like, oh, I think I could either do this myself or I want to do it myself?
No, I was like, I was so unhappy, and I was about to quit, and then I got fired. Like it was
Oh,
just,
nice. Okay,
yeah, yeah,
good.
yeah.
Amazing.
It was
Forcing
not
measure.
totally, and it was, it was like a 10-person company, and they shouldn't have hired me. I didn't know what I was doing. I was essentially leading product. Basically, when I joined, there was another product manager who I had been working with, and it was basically us two doing product with the CEO. She was more senior. And then between the time that I was talking to them and then I accepted the offer, she quit. And so then it was like me as a brand new product person and CEO. And it didn't really make sense for me to be there. And I actually credit them with a lot because they put me through a boot camp to learn product management at oh my gosh, I'm totally forgetting the agency, but there was this agency in San Francisco that basically you could it was actually really interesting. It was they would come on board, they would bring you on board as a client, and they would teach you project management, and they would also like project manage your work. It's like a
Okay.
service back in the
Yeah.
days of like as all of this stuff was starting and product was kind of this was 2015, and so it was earlier days of product. And I learned so much through that. I learned what a sprint was. I learned all of that stuff.
Nice.
And so in 6 months, I basically got a full education on how to be a PM, and amazing. And so when it happened, like I was literally about to quit because that's a much longer story. I was just like, what am I even doing here? I'm so unhappy. Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And they were like, hey, we need somebody, more senior. I honestly don't know why we hired you. And I was like, yeah, that's a fair point. I don't know why you hired me either.
Right.
And it basically was my sign from the universe to, okay, go actually do the thing you want to do. And so at that point, I didn't know exactly what I knew. I wanted to do something in health and wellness. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what the right business was. And so I just started, this sounds crazy in retrospect, but I started by convincing this kombucha company that I liked to let me sell their product on the West Coast because I just wanted to drink it, which turned into me peddling a bunch of health food at stores in San Francisco. So I would literally like walk into a coffee shop in San Francisco and
Yeah.
say, I can restock your entire cabinet full of like health and wellness products. Like, and I will get commission on whatever you sell. Like,
Yep.
you don't do anything. And some people were like, "Go, and other people other people said, "Cool, like, that sounds
Nice.
great." And so I, spent a year and a half peddling health food, which turned into ultimately consulting for some of these companies and, like, on the food side, and then
Hmm.
doing I did all kinds of stuff in health and wellness, all the way from the peddling health food to working in VC a little bit and helping fundraise, and then all the way to this one company I found called Parsley Health, which was the instigation for what ended up being Rupa. So once I found Parsley Health, it's like, this is it. I believe in this future. Let me go build infrastructure for this.
Nice. Well, what's interesting, even that as you were telling that, I'm starting to think like, so you ended up coming out, you got product, you got boot camp and product, then you got boots on the ground, cold selling, and working out your pitch and your flow and your story and all that sort of stuff. And then you got some VC, and then you also saw something that you feel like you could do better. And so basically that period was just like gathering all the tools in the tool belt.
And you missed one of the most important ones, which I didn't mention, which is sheer desperation.
Yeah, that helps.
Needing
Yeah,
to
yeah.
figure something out
Right.
because of living in this city, I have rent to pay. Like, just there's so much going on. It's funny. I think people glorify I'm starting this company because of the mission, because of this problem I face. Like, yes, all of that is true. And I deeply believed in what we were doing. I spent 100% of my time in health and wellness. I was obsessed with the industry. I was doing it in my free time, even for years prior, probably for a decade prior. And, you know, I have a chip on my shoulder. I want to prove that I can do something. There's all of that too that drives you.
Yeah. Amazing. So you saw Parsley and you started sort of working with that or in and around that. And was that the sort of like, okay, I see what they're doing and I think I could do it better? Or like, what was the sort of, what was the few months before, a few weeks before sort of the idea of Rupa?
Yeah, so it's basically even before Parsley at Stanford in grad school, I was studying meditation. So Stanford was, I believe, the first med school that had all of its residents go through a meditation course as well, or something like that. I might be getting the details wrong, but they had a they had multiple meditation courses that you could actually take for credit. And so I was doing that. I actually dropped out. I started a healthy chocolate company. I worked at Lululemon, which was fascinating. I was actually doing like life coaching and wellness coaching for other grad students. I was an RA. I was also a TA for this designing healthcare experiences where we worked with doctors and patients and change behaviors and things like that course. There was so many little things I was doing because my fundamental belief coming in was there is a new wave of healthcare and medicine, and it's not going to look like the healthcare and medicine we have today. It's going to be inclusive of all these other things. And the way I described it was there's wellness, which is Soul Cycle and Lululemon and frozen yogurt and all of that. And then there's medicine, which is the hospital. And I believe that there was like this category in the middle where you are, as a person, not even a patient, you are taking care of yourself in a way that's not just pure wellness, but is actually now it's obvious, but then I didn't have a word for it. And so when I saw parsley in 2016, I believe, 2015, 2016, it was the first time I saw this is what it is. It's functional medicine, integrative we called it functional medicine, but there was also integrative medicine. There was, oh my gosh, wow, I'm losing the term for it, but it'll come lifestyle based medicine. Like
Hmm.
there was a term for it. And so what parsley showed me was there was a category and my instinct that this is not just about optimizing your 1%. This is about it's a new paradigm on real chronic illness and how we actually get healthy from at our core. It is a actual real tool to handle a lot of these issues that people are having every single day and the medical system doesn't have an answer for. And so with parsley, I saw infertility, autoimmune conditions, early detection of cancer. I mean, all kinds of things. So parsley was, yes, all the stuff that you didn't have, you intuited because I had experience in tons of these areas come together in this package. And here's what this package is called. And I saw the future. Like to me, that was the future. And I said, this is going to be what everybody wants. How do we bring it to everybody? Let me go do that. I realized I was like, if there was a company that I wanted to be a part of, it would have been Parsley because it was seed stage. I loved everything about it. They wanted me to come work for them, but they wanted me to move to New York. And in that moment, I had a decision. I was like, do I go do that or do I take a leap and do my own thing? And I was
Right.
like, let me take a leap and do my own thing.
I love it. Do you remember the moment or the period in which you, I don't know, is it hairs on the back of your neck, or is it like that sort of like I can see the Matrix in the future? Is there something that stuck with you that were like you couldn't get rid of?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, so as part of the way I even got the Parsley gig was it was so random. I was this is a much longer story of how I got here, but the short answer of that is I did my undergrad at Wharton. I came out to Stanford, and what I knew was if I was going to stay in New York and all my friends were doing the Wall Street thing, and I actually studied finance, and so that was my world. And so I came out here because I knew that I could not be the best version of myself, as cheesy as that sounds, unless I came out to the West Coast because I needed to physically distance myself from the super unhealthy characteristics of the East Coast.
Yes. Right.
And
No,
so
I get it.
I came out here, I quit drinking. That was a big, big, big shift for me. And one of the things I wanted to do, again, this was 2012, 2013, back when it wasn't cool to quit drinking. I was definitely a weirdo.
Yeah.
And I quit drinking and I wanted to start a non-alcohol bar. And so I had this idea for a non-alcohol bar, and I just, I was like talking about it to people. Back up. I'm in this phase of, peddling health food and looking for interesting companies and interesting trends that I can be a part of to learn for
Hmm.
consulting gigs. That was the idea. I was like, let me go consult for different companies, and then how I'm going to find where the market is in this space. Because I didn't know what the space was. I just knew that there was something there. So I had found this clean beauty was another category I was really interested in, like clean beauty products and things like that. And so I found this company, Credo Beauty, which is now pretty big, but at the time was just kind of getting started. And I emailed them and said, hey, I went to their website and went to just the reach out to us text box on their
Contact
website.
us form.
Exactly. And I just sent them an email. I was like, hey, I am really passionate about the space. I have a lot of ideas on what we could do. And I sent them some ideas and like things that I like could offer for them. And they got back in like an automated message like, thank you so much for your interest. Like, we're not, we don't need anything from you at this time. And then I sent them another message. I was like, no, listen, here's what I think you're doing wrong. Here's what I think you could do better. And then I got a response, and it was the head of marketing was like, why don't you come meet me in person? This seems super interesting. So I ended up meeting her in person. I go down in San Francisco on I think they're in Fillmore District. They're on Fillmore Street, and I meet her in person. We talk about clean beauty, and at the end of the conversation, I mentioned this non-alcohol bar just as something that I'm really passionate about. And she says, "Oh my gosh, I love this idea. I'm so passionate about it. I don't drink. I'm like the only one of my friends who doesn't drink." It became this thing. Forget about that conversation. Nothing really happened from that. Few months later, I get a random text message from this woman. And she says, I want you to meet my friend. She, I think you should talk to her about this non-alcohol bar idea. Cool. I go to coffee, meet this friend, talk to her about the non-alcohol bar idea. The night before I had been in LA and I got a Facebook ad for Parsley Health. That's how I found out about Parsley.
Wow.
So it had been on my mind, and actually the launch party had been that night, but I was, couch surfing in my friend's apartment because I didn't have any money, and it was already 10 p.m. at night. The party was like almost over. I wasn't going to go, but I was like, this is interesting. And it only happened because I was targeted because I was geolocated in LA and they were in LA. I come back to San Francisco. I meet with this girl for coffee, and I casually mentioned Parsley Health to her because we're talking about this whole category stuff. And she says, oh, I know Robin. She's a good friend of mine who's the founder of Parsley Health.
Oh my gosh.
She puts me in touch with Robin. And at that point, I'd done enough like cold outreach to know that unless I actually offer something up front, no one's going to take the time to talk to me.
Right.
So I reach out to Robin and I say, hey, I actually like did a whole, like, I basically called a bunch of friends, built a survey, had them go look at the website, got their feedback. And then I told Robin, based on the survey, here's what I think you can do better. And
Nice.
here's what I think we should do, and all of these ideas. This is like my first time talking to her. And then she was like, who are you? What do you do? And then I made a whole presentation about it and pitched my idea. And so I basically ended up, she was like, great, come work for us as like a consultant. And that ended up being a essentially year-long stint where I got deeper and deeper and deeper with the company. And my whole experience at Parsley, like my goal was I need to understand why retention, like why are people leaving? How do we get people to stay? And how do we actually create an experience that would keep people, around. So because of that, I called, I don't know, I probably talked to hundreds of their patients. I looked at, I think we had 1,000 patients when I was there, and I looked at every single one of their charts. So I knew these stories inside and out, and I will never forget you this whole long stories because you asked me about that moment. In that moment, one of the moments was sitting on the couch and in LA, laying on the couch, like couch surfing, getting this ad and seeing the puzzle pieces come together of everything I'd done for the last 10 years. Another moment was when I called this customer. I'm in my apartment in North Beach in San Francisco in this like teeny tiny, we didn't even have a living room. It was just like 3 bedrooms. Like if I blow dried my hair, the power would go out. It was like a big apartment. And I'm standing in my kitchen talking to this customer who had told me that she was on 37 different medications before coming to Parsley. She had been seeing she'd seen 10 different doctors. She had no, and she was like, 3 months at Parsley. I'm telling you, it changed my life. Totally changed my life. I am off of every medication and supplement except for one, and I'm weaning off of that one. I have never felt better. And she told me, she's like, I never thought I could have a family. And she's like, I met my person and I'm about to have a family. And the only reason that is because of Parsley.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm telling, like, that was one story. I heard hundreds of these stories. To me, it was so obvious. It was like, you can't deny people having these experiences. Like, say what you want about the evidence, like, evidence-based medicine, like, this is evidence-based medicine. So,
All
anyway,
those
it's a
like
great long
light
story.
switches start flicking, and then you're just like, and the time travel happens where you like see the future and you're like, okay, this is what has to happen.
Yes, future is here, it's not evenly distributed.
It's funny, I have a personal story from my oldest when he ever since he was a little one has I don't know any other way to put it. He never had good poops. Like he literally, it was always just sort of like, and we would go to the doctor and they would go, oh, it's just, he's just one of those kids has a funny tummy. You know what I mean? Just has
Yeah, oh my
oh, his
god.
tummy is just sort of, and, and, growing up, watching my dad from a medical perspective and typically through 80s and 90s and 2000s, so much of that symptomatic, my knee hurts, fix it, I think I have arthritis, fix it, like just that sort of, I have something wrong, if you can just give me the thing or tell me what to do and I'll fix it, versus the sort of proactive. But I always got so frustrated with that. I'm like, you can't just tell me he's just a sensitive tummy. So we got a GI map for him, and we send off the stool, we get the thing back, we go through the whole process. Um, we cut pineapple, almonds, like we started cutting these things, dairy, specific, like gluten. We started cutting about 7 or 8 things. Mm, 3 weeks go by, and all of a sudden he's running out of the bathroom. He's like, "You guys got to look at this!" Like,
That
just
is
no.
amazing!
There's just this whole period where, like, literally he would tell us every time to like come see it, and after a while, I had to be like, "Buddy." Like, I'm so proud of you, but like also like I don't have to come see it anymore. Like we're all good. But like it was that difference between he's just an upset tummy kid versus like, nope, if you cut pineapple and almond and like a handful of these things that basically his body is like danger, 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 then he's all good. And ever since then, he's been all good. And so that I very much resonate with that idea of,
Yes, totally.
of really looking at the underlying and being able to have access to the labs and results on a proactive basis versus just like the medicine based
Or
kind
even
of
just
thing.
getting curious and asking why. I mean, we had a similar story, similar and different story of our, 1-month-old son who wasn't pooping he's pooping every 5 days. And we go to the doctor and he's like, oh, my kid only poops like once every, one time she didn't poop for 3 weeks. Like, this is totally normal. Like, don't worry about it.
Is
And
that
then
the
I go
science
talk to,
answer? My
yeah,
son does
and
that
then
too.
totally. And went and talked to the midwife and one of the midwives I worked with and lactation consultant. And she looked at him and she says, I think he might need to eat more. Everything is telling me this is just a volume problem. And she's like, it might be a tongue tie and it might be like he might not be like getting enough. And sure enough, tongue tie problem, wasn't eating enough. As soon as we started feeding him, daily poops, totally fine. And he was, I mean, went from unhappy baby to super happy, laughing, smiling all the time. If we just accept normal, like, this is the thing that gets me, right? Currently, it is normal to be obese. It is normal to have if normal is more common than not, it is normal to have all of these things. Does anyone want to be obese? Like, no. We should not be looking at normal. We need to be looking at optimal. And even with labs, the thing that's wild is the way they get their reference range is they take a population and you try to control it for somewhat healthy, but you just take a population, you run the lab, and you look at the ranges and then you set a reference range. That is not optimal. Like the
Don't
what?
do it on the, don't do it.
And if you look at it, like, the reference ranges are changing slightly. And that's because our population is getting unhealthier and unhealthier. And so the range for normal is getting wider and wider and wider. What does normal even mean?
Yeah, totally. So what was that like? You had that aha moment. What was the period in between that and that I'll call, naming and buying a domain name? Like, what was that period of like, okay, I'm
Oh
starting
my gosh.
from a
Okay.
Rupa perspective.
So I'd been around startups for a while at this point. I ended up working, my junior year summer internship was with Hatch Labs, which is the incubator that ended up starting Tinder. I was there pre Tinder days, but like we built and launched a bunch of apps and things like that. It was a mobile incubator, and so I'd seen enough to know a few core principles about building startups, and one of them is, you can think and think, but unless you actually do and get something out, you're not gonna like creating that momentum is the most important thing. Second is you're never going to get it right. You just need to drop something into the universe and then let customers give you feedback. Or it is like you need like the only thing that matters is product market fit. Like I had some of these principles and I think that a lot of that stuff really helped me. So I came into it knowing I believe that we need to work on this problem. And this problem was just the future of medicine is going to look very different. I think everybody, like, I want to give access to that to everybody. And so, what is my pathway to get there? And so, I mean, probably the first thing I did a couple things that maybe are novel and interesting. One is just wrote a list of 10 ideas I had. And then I went down the list and I just gut tested them, where I called up, the ideal customer, whether they're my friends of friends, whomever, and just like went down them and and tried to figure out what would be the best idea. Another thing I did was I had another friend who was starting a company at the same time, and we were both solo founders, and so we wanted to, it's easy to get in as a solo founder, like when you're just starting out, it's easy to like live in your own bubble and like delay and delay and delay.
Yeah.
We wanted some accountability and momentum, so we started this blog together. So we basically would interview people, and she was also health and wellness. Like we would interview people in health and wellness, and we just publish it. So we had this cadence where we'd publish one every week. And so for a couple months before I started, I mean, it didn't go anywhere. The purpose of the blog was to hold us accountable and help us feel momentum and give us a reason to wake up in the morning and like do something and ship something. And so we did that. That was super helpful for me. And then you also have this accountability buddy, and like you're talking about your goals and things like that. And so I quit Parsley October 31st. It was Halloween in 2017, I believe. And I threw this big that night, like Halloween party, just like, on a whim. And then the next day, people were there till like 3 a.m. In my apartment. And then the next day, I drove to Carmel. Another long, ridiculous story on how I have like a second family there who I met at this like Wim Hof conference and the whole thing. Anyway, there's Carmel's like my happy place. So I drove to Carmel. I stayed in my friend's guest house and I just wrote for a week straight about what I wanted to do and what I wanted to build, like no distractions.
Oh wow.
And so I had November, I told myself November and December was gonna be my time to explore and see my family and travel a little bit and just kind of like do my thing. Jan 1, I'm all in. So what I wanted to do was actually do a Vipassana, which is a 10-day silent meditation retreat, but they're actually really competitive. Like it's hard to get into. So I was on the wait list. I didn't get in. So I was kind of bummed about that. But I ended up, I went to Yosemite. I went home to Texas to see my family. I went on a holiday trip with my parents. Or my mom and my brother. We went to South Africa, which was super cool. And then we came back. And on the flight back from South Africa, I told myself I'd done my 10 ideas. I told myself, and I'd picked my idea, and I said, by the time this plane lands, I'm going to draw mocks for the product I want to build. Like I have to.
Oh,
That's
I love that's so
and
good.
we're gonna and this was I was gonna land on Jan 1, I believe, because of like the time difference coming back. I was gonna land on Jan 1. We were gonna go. I land and I open my and I call my acupuncturist. I say, meet me at home. I'm at the airport. I want you to review these like mocks I made. So she comes over. I check my email and I'd gotten into a Vipassana program that was going to be over my birthday in January. So I was just like, I told myself I was going to start the company. Do I do that or do I go to this thing?
Right.
And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go. I'll delay this by another month. Like, I'm just going to go. So before I go, I wanted to come up with like buy the domain name, come up with idea, like start creating the, V of what it was going to be a ZocDoc for, functional medicine providers essentially.
Hmm.
And that was the first idea. And so I sat in my brother's office because I knew that if I was going to sit at home, I needed people watching me. I needed to feel the pressure. So I sat in my brother's office. He had a startup at the time, and I just, went through every domain name I could find. I bought a domain name, I registered it, I pack up my bags, and I go to this Vipassana. And so then in the Vipassana, I hear one of the things that we talk about is Rupa, which is Sanskrit for physical, manifestation. It's like the physicality of our body. I was like, ooh, I like that. So I come back, I look up rupahealth.com. It's available. It's $9.99, which is the only amount that I was willing to pay for a domain name.
Yep.
I wanted a .com. I wanted it to be something health. And so I buy it and I'm off to the races. The next thing that happens was it was the Super Bowl. I ended up being super warm in San Francisco. I go with a friend and her fiance at the time, or boyfriend at the time, to Ocean Beach, and I'm like, I want a cold plunge. So we go. It's a Super Bowl. I'm like, I don't need to watch a Super Bowl. I want to go cold plunge. So we go into the ocean, and then we come out, and I'm just at that point, I'm asking everybody now, do you know any contract engineers who can help me? Do you know any? And he's like, oh, I have a friend from high school who's starting a contract engineering firm. Here's his number. I get his number. I end up hiring him. They build the first prototype. Like, this is how everything happened. It was just, let me just put it out into the world, see what happens, and then one step at a time.
Feel like I love those moments, and I don't know why domain names are so specific. There's something about the second you hit register and it says it's yours, you're sort of like, I own this company. Like it's so physical. But I love that period where it started flowing for you and you just ended up finding yourself in that river of, and everything sort of flows in the right direction. I love that.
You brute force momentum until you have momentum. And then you use momentum to keep going.
Yeah. What was the first, couple of months like when you started to try and like, more push into the proof of concept and the prototype of the idea?
Yeah. There's so many ridiculous stories. I think at that time, I needed a logo and like a design. I needed somebody to design. I had no skills other than convincing people to help me with stuff. um, I ha- I had the idea. I needed someone to create prototype, like a design mock-ups for me. And then like I drew them out. I needed somebody to make them pretty. And so at Parsley, we had worked with, I think, this design firm. I think that's how we met them. And it's all fuzzy to me now. But they basically, because I had done some like some like deck building and fundraising stuff before for other people. So they reached out and they actually wanted help with their like fundraise or something like that because they were actually spinning out a company from the design firm. And so
Hmm.
I basically like traded help with that for them to build out our mocks. And
Nice.
I think I paid them something like really small, at this point it was all my savings. At that point I had $30,000 of savings. And every dollar was spent out of that savings. And so I was feeling it. Uh,
Yeah.
and so I think I spent $2,500 maybe on everything, like the prototype. Like we did everything in such a small budget. And then I ended up going to this like Tony Robbins conference in the middle of all of this, right? And everyone, I'm walking out, I'm like taking calls with this design firm. They're like making the mocks, and we're doing doing the engineering stuff, and it's fine. It's also just me at this point, and I I end up buying the full Tony Robbins package while I'm there, and it was $10,000, and I only $1,000 in my bank account. And it was this moment of this was the most expensive thing I'd ever bought in my life by far. And for some reason, I was like, this is going to be worth it. I just know it's going to be worth it. I look back, it was absolutely worth it. Like,
That's amazing.
absolutely worth it. And I have so many little points on that. But I come back from the Tony Robbins thing and I basically like write an email to every single person I know. Like, that's not an exaggeration. I went through my inbox and I just got emails of everybody who was even tangentially related to my life, my work, whatever. And I send out this email with hundreds of people on it, BCC'd, and it was life update. And it was, I'm starting this company, this thing happened, this other thing happened, like, here's what's going on. And I believe, no, sorry, this was a little bit later. What came before this was I just start emailing people like my old professors, like old coworkers, telling them, hey, I'm starting a company. Just thought you'd be interested in knowing, just to see what happens.
Nice. Yeah.
My old professor messaged me and said, that's amazing. Come talk to our class about it. Because he thinks it's a real company. It's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
I ended up driving to Stanford, giving a talk about what I wanted to build with Rupa. And that's how I met Rosa, who ended up coming on board as my first employee and then my co-founder.
My gosh. Oh, I love these dot connections. Like,
Yeah. And then
so
afterwards, I
good.
sent the email after she came on board. I sent the email with all of to everybody,
Nice.
and then stuff came in from there. And you just you just never know. And I was also on Instagram like doing stories about just behind the scenes of everything that was happening. And people would send me, at first we did just matching of patients who wanted functional medicine care and it was acupuncture in the beginning and then acupuncturists. And I just message out anybody know anybody who wants care. And that's how we
Right.
found patients.
Oh, I love that. That's amazing. And so you meet your first sort of, what ended up being your first employee, and you're now you've sort of started from you give the talk and you're thinking it's not really a company yet, it's an idea of a company, and then you sort of, you start putting these building blocks together. As you start thinking about building the team, I've seen you sort of mention before the nicest thing you could do for someone is to sort of set a high bar of expectations. Like when you start building the team, what was your approach, and were there sort of lows that came before that sort of principle, or did you start with that?
Yeah. Oh no. Like I think I started with that because that's what comes naturally to me. For the first, I don't know, year and a half, we were like a 7 days a week company. We had our product meetings on Sunday mornings. Like we would just and then we would have the week. And we were super intense. And it wasn't because it was like cool to be intense or we just all did it because that's who we were. And we lived and breathed this. And I do think that that was a huge part of what made us successful was just our cadence of how fast we shipped, how intense we were, how much we cared, the obsessiveness, all of that. And then you get to this really interesting place where if the thing that made you successful almost like bites you in the butt because you suddenly need to hire more people, those people come on board and don't realize what it took to get here. They just see the charts going up and to the right without much effort, right? It's like we can do whatever, and the charts keep going up and to the right. And in Rupa's case, like we we never, to the point when we sold, and I think even now have never had a down quarter in the history of Rupa. And so it was really hard to convince people to be like, intensity, ship fast, like how and I think I got a little bit lazy, to be honest, like in
Mhm.
the middle lazy in terms of my or maybe looser in terms of my holding super high expectations. And I think that that is something that I realized I boomeranged back around
Hmm.
to, and I would do it differently this time around. Um, and I forgot who said this, but like you can't teach or coach drive and intensity. It's either there or it's not. You
And you
hire.
set the expectations, and if that's where you're at as a personality and your life journey, if that's what you want to do, then come on board. But if it's not, then great, just don't match with that
Exactly.
person. But that it's such an interesting journey to go from 7 days a week and sort of hustle And then I think the assumption is at some point you should just turn into sort of 9 to 5 and comfortable and weekends and like don't email, whatever. But it's hard to make a dent in the universe if it's super comfortable.
If you look at any successful company, there are people who, regardless of how big it is, are the people who are like pounding the pavement, the people who are pushing the gas. Like they're the ones who are, in some cases, like not single handedly, but like each of them single handedly, many hands, pushing the company forward. There will always be those people. You cannot have a company where everybody is working 9 to 5 and kind of logging out. It just doesn't
Yeah.
work.
Did you have periods when you were your periods where you were growing really fast and like those, like going through those sort of growth pains, as you mentioned, sort of going from 7 days a week to you start adding team members and layers and those sort of things? Like, what were the things that you sort of learned in that growth period?
Like there wasn't a growth period. There was just the growth in general. I don't think it never slowed down. It never slowed down. And that to me, that's the most fun part of building a company is the amount of personal growth you go through second to none. Like it's incredible to the point where pre having a baby, could never have compared startup life and baby life to who was I to compare that. Having a child with zero prep, because I basically sold the company, had the kid, didn't really have time to do anything. It felt very similar. The rhythm of it, where every day is super chaotic. You're dealing with things on an hour by hour basis. You have this screaming, crying thing that you don't know when it's going to need you, but it's going to need you all the time. You're kind of on to it. The
No
amount of
playbook.
chaos, change, yeah, no playbook. Like the amount of chaos and change and like was very similar, honestly. And I think that I might have had a much more rough time with selling Rupa and leaving and suddenly going into calm if I hadn't immediately gone back into chaos.
Right.
But out of chaos comes incredible growth. And that phase was just nonstop. There's so many moments. Like there are so many lows. There are so many highs. I think that from a count perspective, there's probably more lows than highs, but
Hmm.
from an emotional perspective, you know, like for example, my former head of medical just came and visited and stayed with me for the last 3 days, and it was just you build these relationships that are second to none. It's
Right.
incredible.
Yeah. How did it feel after? And I'm I'm making this up just for the sake of having a point to point to. How did it feel post signature of selling the company? Like this thing that you basically, from buying the domain name to saying, I agree, goodbye.
Yeah,
Like, how did that feel right after that kind of moment?
I'm either still processing it or I'm never going to process it because I went straight from that to having the baby to I
Right.
didn't even have a doctor when the day that our the deal closed. I also had I was up till 2 a.m. The deal kind of leaked. It was a little messy, but then I slept for 2 hours, got woken up at 4 a.m. to review and sign the last doc. Did that, went to breakfast with my head of finance where we were both just kind of like numb because we'd been running this thing for, 5 months. And then went straight from there to my 20-week ultrasound appointment. Found out that there might be like an issue with the kidneys, just like couldn't process that, had to put that aside. Went to the office where things were normal and I did one on ones and just like we're totally normal one on one. Went to a conference to prep this like launch thing and then had to, email all of our best. I mean, it was absolutely insane. And then I still didn't have a doctor. And I didn't know where I was going to give birth. That I had put everything off. And so I either haven't processed or I'm never like yet or I'm never going to process, I think. But I realized like I'm such a future oriented person that I love going from one thing to the next to the next. Like I think in a lot of ways I'm built for this kind of intensity and speed. And I recognize that not everybody is, but I can't it's not really a choice. It just is. And so I think I had one moment where I was like, I guess like people don't talk about this, but it's like I went from 6.5 years of working on this thing and sweating every dollar and not making much money. Like at the end of it, the lawyers looked at my comp for the last, the entire thing because you basically have to average it out for this whole thing. You have to review the, executive comp. It's the whole thing. They're like, Tara, wow, you really didn't pay yourself like much at all. Like if you
Right.
average it, over how many ever years. Right. I didn't take salary, just the whole thing, like bare necessities. And I did have this moment of like, wow, I feel free. And from like a financial perspective, which was a crazy feeling to have because I've never experienced that before in my life. Obviously that doesn't last long, right? You're kind of like,
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
cool, on to the next thing,
You
you
get to
know.
go
It
like
becomes
this, like once, and then you're like,
like,
okay.
that was weird because I never in my life thought about money. This part is true. This is not just a sounds nice to say. Like I did not build Rupa to make money. Uh, I that was not the goal. If I would have done that, I probably would have sold like way earlier. Like I built it because I deeply cared about what we were building. I also knew that this is how I want to spend my time and my days, like building a company. I also wanted to build a team who I really loved working with. I also wanted work to be fun. I also wanted to prove something to myself. Like there's all these reasons for why I built it, but money was never one of them. And so at the end, realizing that it was going to be great for a lot of people, myself included, was a very weird feeling that I hadn't ever anticipated or thought about or spent any amount of time on it. So that hit me in a weird way. But after that, it was just kind of like, whoa, what is happening? But 3 days later, that weekend that after we sold, my husband convinced me to join him in his like next company that he was starting up. So we're back in
By
it.
the way, I got
Yeah,
this idea. And it's funny because you can also see it in your Instagram journey where like meatloaf to Augie, by the way, I'm also kind of working on a thing. Like it like your sort of like, flow with how you build and grow and continue on is amazing.
totally. And I think that like I talked to a lot of people and they're like, wait, why why would you start something again? Like, don't you want to chill? And I can't tell you the number of people who told me, they're like, you need to take time off. You need to chill. You need to. And it's funny because like I just don't work that way. Um,
Yeah.
I actually take time off every Saturday while I was building Rupa. I had zero plans. That was
Hmm.
my thinking day. I didn't see anybody. I went to a coffee shop. I read. That was my pause, and I did it every Saturday, and then Sunday through Friday was, like, meetings, work, whatever, and that really worked for me, and I think one thing that people don't realize is, like, when we ascribe these ideas of how somebody is supposed to live in terms of you need to whatever, it doesn't work. Everyone has to find their own rhythm.
This was so great. And like, I love these early stories and hearing all of it. And I know it's going to be so useful for people who are going through this journey of, should it be this way or am I feeling this way? Is this okay? And sort of hearing your journey is super helpful. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the
Absolutely.
time.
This was amazing. Brought back so many good memories too. You forget all these, like, details of stuff
Yeah.
that happens. I think that one thing is if you look at startups, building startups and life in general as just stories that you're a character in, it becomes super fun. And everything is either a great experience or a great story.
Yeah. Agreed.
Cool.
We'll hang out here. We'll catch up just for a second.
Yep.